Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Gallowgateshots FPL Show. My name is Matt, and with me again is my FPL best friend, Dan. How we doing, mate?
Oh,
You all right?
I'm much better after you've said that I'm your FPL best friend.
Shucks, stop it. You're going to make us blush. No, I just thought I'd throw that little compliment your way,
Thank you.
make you feel a little bit better.
I
So
do
this
feel
week, good. This week, we are going to be talking about midfielders. We have spent the last few weeks looking at Newcastle players in particular. So if you haven't seen that one already, that's a really good watch. If I do say so myself, have a little look at that. And then also we did a little episode around goalkeepers and defenders from other clubs that you might be interested in putting in your draft. So again, go and check that one out as well, because that one's blooming brilliant too. And this week we are talking about midfielders, like I said. So where better to start than Mr. FPL himself, Mo Salah, who was priced at 12.5 million again, second highest valued player in the game alongside Harry Kane. Um, However, he's not as popular as what he has been in recent years. Daniel, what do we think of Mo Salah this year?
answers on a postcard, a bit like Trent, really.
Yeah,
I think the major issue is there are a lot of midfielders that you can go for, and one of Salah's historical benefits, other than the fact that he's just consistently the highest scoring midfielder on the game, he's probably going to be the highest scoring midfielder on the game again this year, is that he's always been a really good captaincy option, but everyone's just going to captain Haaland. So if you aren't going to captain Salah, then it's a case of his reliable points are still only worth the same as everyone else's. And it's not, you know, Salah on his own versus Rashford on his own, or versus Foden on his own, or Saka on his own, or Martinelli on his own. It's Salah plus whatever other midfielder that you've got versus two midfielders that make up the same price. So first of all, is what formation are you going to play? I think if you go for Salah, you have to be playing either a 4-4-2 or a 3-4-3, which is fine, totally fine. But if you go for just four midfielders, then as you're about to find out through this podcast as we go through, you're going to be missing on a lot of players, a lot of talent. So it's about the double up. Can you get, maybe a Saka in an Mbumo or something like that? How are they going to do versus a Salah and a 4.5 million midfielder? Something similar to that. I actually think it'd be even worse than that. I actually think it's Saka and Rashford you could get together for Salah and a 4.5 million midfielder. That's something like that. It's crazy how much money he's going to take out of that midfield. Now, the one benefit of having them is that their fixtures aren't bad at all. So their opening fixtures, fair enough, the first 3 weeks aren't great. Chelsea, Bournemouth, Newcastle. Actually, first 4 weeks, Villa. I rate Villa this season. I do think they're going to do well. I think Chelsea are going to be better under Poch. I think we're going to do a job as well. Bournemouth at home, Salah is the best captaincy option for game week 2. But then after that, after those first 4 game weeks, you've got Wolves, West Ham, Spurs, Brighton, but then Everton, Forest, Luton, Brentford, all the way up to match day 13 when you've got City and you can still score against City. Then Fulham, Sheffield United, Palace. So he's got a lovely run basically from match day 5 onwards. Now, it's with other players, you can say, oh, well, just bring them in match day 5. Salah would have to be someone that you probably brought in on a wild card because he's so expensive. And you're just going to struggle. He is the best Liverpool asset, in my opinion, still, because he's the most nailed. He's going to play so many minutes on that right-hand side. Whereas on the left, you've got Nunez, Diaz, and Jota. Through the middle, you've got Jota, Nunez, and Gakpo. So they've got 3 players basically for every position. Now, Klopp could go to that box in which Nunez plays as the striker, and then you've got like maybe Gakpo and Szoboszlai in behind, a bit like how Man City played last year. So I don't really know what to do with some of the Liverpool players because I've got no idea how they're going to play, and that's a little bit disconcerting with how much money you're probably going to spend on them, which is kind of why I wouldn't really go for Diaz or Jota, or I think they're the two. I think Gakpo's been moved to a forward this year.
Yeah, he has, yeah.
So I wouldn't really go for them from the off. I do think they're going to be absolutely brilliant assets at some point this season because Diaz and Jota are such good players, especially Diaz. He's unbelievable. Really unlucky to get injured last year. I think he'd probably be nailed on that left-hand side if it wasn't for his injury. But we don't know quite how it's going to start. And I feel like you could maybe bring in Diaz or something like that at some point when those fixtures change. So for me, I'm a no on Salah personally, just because I'd rather stack that midfield with more assets that I'm not going to captain anyway, because I'm just going to be captaining Haaland most weeks as it is. What about you?
Do you know what? I think you summed that up really well. I think at the moment, Salah's coming up to just under a quarter of the game owning him, which for Salah isn't that much. But then actually, if you think about it, a quarter of the game owns Salah. And if he's captained by them, the effective ownership is actually still going to be quite damaging. Only 239 points last year in a so-called bad season for Liverpool. 19 goals, and he got... so do you remember how I mentioned Trent's last 10 games, his statistics?
Yes, it was 7 assists, 1 goal, was it, in 10 games?
Yeah, essentially. So Mo Salah had 7 goals and 5 assists in his last 10 games. So if that's anything to go by in regards to how Liverpool are going to start the season, it does make me worry. Obviously, the 19 goals last season, it was only the second time that he scored less than 20 goals since he joined Liverpool in 2017.
Wow.
So, I mean, the chances are he's going to hit 20 goals again based on historical data. So in terms of, I think Salah would be a no-brainer if we didn't already have Haaland there at such a high price. I think to get Haaland, which you've kind of almost got to consider Haaland a non-entity now.
Yeah.
To then try and spend so much of your, 86 million that you've got, to spend 12 and a half of that on one player, that does a hell of a lot of damage to the rest of your team just by having him, especially if you consider that you might want Trent, you might want Saka, you might want a decent 7.5 like Maddison or Foden, who we're going to talk about in a minute. You're going to want Rashford. You're going to potentially want Bruno, because there's so many very good mid-priced midfielders this year. It's making it almost impossible to have 2 or 3 decent mid-price forwards, some decent mid-price defenders, and afford Salah. It's just not possible this year. You're gonna have to make some very big sacrifices. I've not come across a team with Salah in it yet and Haaland that I've thought that's going to do better than a team with a mid-priced midfield stacked, like 5-man midfield. But yeah, sorry for the lack of advice there. That's just throwing some statistics and things in your way. I think if you want to go Salah, by all means, do it.
Yeah.
At the minute, I'm without Salah, and I'm also on a 4-man midfield. So it's interesting that you started with that. However, I'm chopping and changing. I'm jumping between a 3-5-2 and a 3-4-3, but that's because I'm looking at there's three strikers that I'm really liking. One which is obvious.
Love to know who these 3 are. Well, yeah, one of them's definitely obvious.
But we'll talk about that next week. Just because we'll talk about strikers then. But like I say, I'm looking at certain fixtures for certain teams, and I'm also looking at a very popular midfielder, and I'm just thinking, I think I can go without that popular midfielder who's slightly below the 7 million bracket, and I'd rather punt on a exciting forward instead.
I've got no idea how. The thing that's given me the most anxiety with this game is picking 5 midfielders out of a possible 9 or something.
Yeah,
I just 100%. Want to put my phone down every time I open the app because I just want a team of midfielders.
Yeah, and that's the difficulty this year, I think, because even at that bracket, like below 6.5, I can already kind of see where there could be potential bargains, but because the pricing of midfielders is so generous, you don't have to drop into that like 6 million and below bracket unless you've got more. And obviously predicting who's going to be that bargain price player is incredibly difficult. So quickly, Kevin De Bruyne, yes or no? 10.5.
No, he's
Doesn't excite.
not even going to
Doesn't
start the
excite
season.
me.
He's
No,
injured, so
doesn't
no.
excite me. I think for 10.5 million, I'm going to at least want to try and captain them at 1 week, and De Bruyne doesn't get me going like he used to. I'd rather invest that elsewhere.
Yep.
Heung-min Son, 5.4% owned. He was pretty much broken last year.
Yeah,
New
wait and see.
New manager
Wait and
bounce,
see.
perhaps.
You have to wait and see. Brentford away is a really difficult fixture. Man United, I think, are going to be a much better team this year, so that's difficult. They've then got 3 nice ones: Bournemouth, Burnley, Sheffield United. And what I've noticed is that certain teams have 3 home fixtures in the first 4 games, and other teams have 4, or the same team, sorry, have 4 home fixtures in their opening 6. And we have seen on this sort of game that home fixtures mean a lot, COVID aside, when actually away teams did quite well. Normally, we'll find that the home teams have a massive advantage. So I really want to be trying to target teams that have 4 home fixtures. So you've got Chelsea, they're one of the teams. You've got Brighton, you've got Brentford. So they're the sort of teams that I kind of want to be looking at in terms of targeting to go for. But equally, I want to stay away from teams that have 4 away games in the opening 6. So Tottenham fall into that bracket. They have Brentford away, Bournemouth away, Burnley away, and Arsenal away in the first 6. And then even then, the 7th game's Liverpool at home. So they play Liverpool, Arsenal, Man United, and Brentford away, because I rate Brentford when they play at home. I don't think they're a great away team. So that's just 4 not very nice fixtures out of 7. And that's when I'll probably wildcard. So I think Son, for me, is a wildcard in around game week 8, something like that.
Yeah.
When they've got Luton away, Fulham at home, Palace away, Chelsea at home, Wolves away. Even then, we'll have to just wait and see for how Tottenham are going to perform. I actually don't think they're going to get a manager bounce or anything. I think they're going to be rubbish again next year. They don't have any fullbacks.
They don't. I don't think their team's set up for the way in which their manager wants to play going forward. Just touching on the subject of the fixtures, Liverpool actually have 5 away games and three home games in their first 8, which, if you consider how poor Liverpool were away last year, just something to consider in terms of Salah as well. So Man United, Rashford and Bruno Fernandes, very highly owned. Rashford's currently sitting on 43%. Bruno's sitting on 25%. Fixtures are Wolves at home, Tottenham away, Forest at home, Arsenal away, Brighton at home, Burnley away, Crystal Palace at home, and Brentford away.
No, Brentford at home. Well, Brentford at home.
Oh, of course it is. Silly me. So in
silly
terms of
you.
silly me. So I can see the appeal definitely of Rashford even at 9 million. Obviously his form was tremendous last year, and I do think they'll kick on quite a bit this year. Bruno's an interesting one. He is sitting in my draft at the minute.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think I mentioned it. I'm sure I've mentioned it on this the other week. Whether Bruno's going to be the one, or Bruno and Mount are going to kind of shift that advanced role, like just interchange. I don't think Bruno's going to be the one to permanently be advanced all the time. It'll be interesting to see, or like how that'll look against the stronger teams. Whether Bruno will sit back and it'll be Mount who's the one kind of slightly more advanced. What do you reckon?
I think this is the first decision that players are going to have to make. Go with one of them. Just go with one of them. They finished 3rd in the league. You want your good players. You want players from good teams. Man United, as much as we all hate to friggin' say it, are a good team. Rashford's going to play further up the pitch. Probably is going to get a higher non-pen XG. However, Bruno Fernandes, I think, had the highest expected assists last year. It's just he was passing to Wout Weghorst in and out of form Jadon Sancho. Jadon Sancho's the punter's pick. He's looking good pre-season. He's looking better. He looked all right at the end of last season without tearing up any trees or anything, but he looked like he was playing with some confidence at the very least. And Fernandes is going to be on penalties as well. He's also cheaper. So there's a word thrown around FPL called variance. This is going to be the first point of variance for me in the season. Who performs out of these two, Rashford or Fernandes? Obviously, we'd all like Fernandes to play further forward to like have him in our teams. But playing further back isn't enough to put me off with how many chances he creates. You can get in the bonus. And again, he's on pens. It's just a free goal, basically. Yeah. If they win a pen, it's a free goal for Fernandes. Pick your poison with them. I currently have Rashford in. But in my previous draft, I had Fernandes in. I don't know who I'm going to go with at the start of the season. I think it depends on if Man United bring in any other forwards. I mean, Rashford could play as the 9. I don't know how much I rate him as a number 9. I do think he's better coming off the left. Yeah, going to be interesting. I don't know which one of those two to go for, but I will be going for one of them.
I've got both at the moment.
I think that's overkill with the fixtures when you can go elsewhere. Don't get us wrong, it's a good sword if one assists the other. I can't really, unless that he wins a penalty and gets the assist, I can't really see Rashford assisting Fernandes too much. But with other midfielders you could have, and again, the fixtures are average. It's just Man United are a really good team, so you can still go for their attacking players in my opinion. It's just when I look at their fixtures, Wolves at home is a really good fixture. Spurs away can be. We've got no idea what Spurs are going to turn up. Nottingham Forest at home, good fixture, but then Arsenal away is dreadful. Brighton at home is not very good. Burnley away is pretty good, obviously. It's Burnley. Palace have a way of frustrating Man United. It's just one of those fixtures that you look at and go, oh yeah, Man United will win that. It rarely turns out that way. They've got Brentford at home. I think they'll do a job over them. So yeah, coming up past sort of game week 8, Man City aside, I think they've got a lovely run where you might want to get both in. But for the first 5, Spurs, Arsenal and Brighton, and 2 of them are away. I personally wouldn't want both of them. I'd just go with one.
Right. And quick question. Who's your favourite Arsenal mid?
Saka, obviously. It's Saka. Saka's the one that's guaranteed for most minutes. Arsenal have a system where out of the forwards, generally, whoever wins it takes it. If anyone else wins it, Saka takes it. That's generally the rule for Arsenal's penalty taking, which means that Saka's likely going to be on penalties. Someone else wins it. He's only 0.5 million more than Martinelli. He's the same price as Odegaard. I appreciate Odegaard got more points last year. All 3 of them outperformed their XG. Havertz is the one I'd stay away from. He's looked rubbish in pre-season. And you could have, for me, it's one of any 4. 2 of any 4. Saka, Martinelli, Odegaard, and Trossard. And I think Trossard's going to get a lot more minutes. It looks like he's going to maybe play in the Granit Xhaka role. If he's playing in there, you want Leandro Trossard, I think, because he's going to be more affordable than the others, which helps. Let me just get Trossard's price up. He's 7 million, so he is more affordable than all of the other Arsenal midfielders.
I just wouldn't go there. I just because of the lack of minutes. I think at the start of the season, you want players who you know you're going to be able to get.
So you're not going to go for any Arsenal midfielder?
Well, I think
it's just Trossard.
What? No, yeah, Trossard.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I wouldn't touch Trossard just because I think out of all of those midfielders, he's the least likely to start out of all of them. I would feel at the moment, I think I'm just, in terms of midfielders, I'm just on Saka because I feel like he's the most likely to start and get minutes.
I think we need triple Arsenal. I'm not overly convinced on Jesus. We can talk about that next week. Their fixtures are Forest at home, Palace away, Fulham at home, Man United at home, Everton away, Spurs at home, Bournemouth away for the first 7. They're one of the teams that are stacked for home games at the beginning. We're all it's just you need triple Arsenal. Whether you go for defender, 2 midfielders, defender, midfielder, forward, 2 midfielders, forward, 2 defenders, midfield, whatever you want, but go for 3 of them. For me, if I was going to go for 2 midfielders, I'd go for Saka and Martinelli. just because I can save 0.5 on Odegaard. Ultimately, go for any of two of those three. The most important thing, just to make sure I'm not incorrect here, Matt, Charity Shield this year is between Man City and Arsenal, right?
I
Community
believe,
Shield.
I believe so.
First
Yeah,
v, second because Man City won both
yeah, they did.
Prem
Yeah,
and
that's right.
FA Cup.
Yeah, you're all right.
They're both going full strength, I think, in that game.
Yeah.
So I think whatever team we see, providing someone doesn't have a mare or gets injured, whatever team we see play Man City, that's the team that'll start the season.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think
I'd
we'll
agree
get a
with you.
good idea of what Arteta wants to do, a good idea of what Pep wants to do. Great that it's two really strong teams. So, yeah, I think that's going to be a good game and a really important one for FPL managers. And that's the game that's going to determine my entire draft, I think.
Yeah, I agree, because I've also got a little eye on Man City's defensive setup as well, because I want a Man City defender, but obviously
100%.
talking about midfielders. In terms of another 8 million, just to kind of keep in mind, Diogo Jota. I'm unsure. We've already said we're unsure on minutes,
Yeah.
but sitting on 2 goals and an assist already in pre-season, but because of the competition up front for them, it's just a kind of non-starter based on what I've said before already about wanting people who I can rely on for minutes. So then we drop down to 7.5 million and 7 million midfielders. Any particular midfielders that catch your eye, Dan?
Yes.
Go for it, mate. You tell me all about them.
So for me, the one is Phil Foden.
Yeah, 100%,
Now,
mate.
I know that we're all at risk of pep roulette. Mahrez looks like he's out the door to Saudi Arabia. Bernardo Silva might even leave. Hopefully doesn't. But Phil Foden, when he's on the pitch, in terms of fantasy points, has the best points per night out. A lot of them, he's an absolute machine on this game when he does get minutes. And you said at the beginning, Haaland's just a non-starter. Everyone has him. Everyone will have him. I mean, let's just quickly have a look at Haaland's
Like
ownership.
85.
86.2%.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, if you don't have Haaland, then you're insane, literally. But let's say you do have him, you're not earning any points. You're just not earning any points off him whatsoever. Someone has to assist them goals. If you think Haaland is going to score that many goals, that 86% of the game have got him in, someone has to pass him that ball. Now, that could be Grealish. De Bruyne is injured. Alvarez is a forward on the game. If Phil Foden looks like he's going to be the one to play, and again, the Community Shield's going to tell us all we need to know, I think, before the Champions League starts, Pep is actually not really guilty of Pep roulette. Once the Champions League starts, I wouldn't have a single one of them. It's a nightmare. But before then, if we get an idea of what his best team is, and I think Phil Foden will fit into that category, he could be the one that's feeding Haaland all these passes. 7.5 million for the champions of England and Europe. And when you consider their games, Burnley away, Newcastle at home, I do actually think we might get something out of that game, but I also definitely think we're going to concede in that game.
Just a little point on that. Actually, they play in the Super Cup the week before they play us, or like
midweek.
Yeah, so that could be a bit of a rotation, and obviously fantastic for us because they might be playing a slightly tired team.
Yeah.
But again, Pep Roulette, he's going to want to win that Super Cup, isn't he?
Well, he will, but I also think he's going to play a stronger team against us than Sevilla. Sevilla won it, right?
Yeah.
I think they'll play a stronger team against, I don't know. Who knows? Who
knows at this point?
Sheffield United away, Fulham at home, West Ham away, Forest, Wolves. It doesn't get bad until game week 8, which is probably when I'm on a wild card anyway. Arsenal, Brighton, Man United. So for 7.5 million, I think Foden's the best. Or you could go Grealish. If you want to be super safe, go Grealish. I just don't think he's going to get as many points as Foden.
I agree. I think if Grealish and Foden play the same amount of games, then Foden gets more points.
Oh, by miles. I think Grealish got more minutes last year, and Phil Foden still outscored him by 20 points.
Wow. Yeah, so exactly that kind of backs up the point. In regards to that sort of 7.5, 7 million bracket, you've got James Maddison there as well, who's proven quite popular. But again, I think that's a wait and see. just purely
Yeah.
because he can create chances. But obviously, if Kane goes, who's he creating those chances for? That if Kane goes, I think it's going to be very interesting for the game because you've also got Richarlison sat there on 7.
Yeah, as a midfielder as well,
Son,
he'll be playing up front for them. He becomes a bit of a no-brainer if Kane leaves.
That's it. And obviously with Maddison feeding him chances, which arguably Spurs have been dying for a few years, it definitely makes it for. I think Maddison and Richarlison are definitely in the same category as Son in the fact that wait and see how they're playing.
Yeah.
On the wild card in game week, wherever you want to do it, 6, 7, or 8, feel free. Like obviously, if they're doing well, it could be a case where everyone's bringing them in. They could be the first bandwagon, really. Other mention as well, Bowen doing fantastically well in pre-season.
Yeah.
Shabazlai. He could also be quite good value if he's getting advanced and taking set pieces. And you've also got Raheem Sterling, who's probably the lowest price has ever been. Chelsea, again, a wait and see. Could just frustrate the hell out of you though, really, couldn't he?
He could. The fixtures are so good. Outside of like the first 2, Luton at home, Forest at home, Bournemouth away, Villa at home, Fulham away, Burnley away. Such good fixtures.
It's hard to ignore. It's really hard to ignore.
Very hard to ignore. I think the good thing is you can sort of. I think we'll get a good idea of how they're going to play in them first 2 games. I think they might struggle in those first 2 games. But once you've got Luton at home, Forest at home, and Bournemouth away, so again, lots of home games in those opening fixtures. The reason why I don't have Sterling at the minute is because I currently have a Chelsea forward in my team. But I just feel like the midfield's too congested as it is. I mean, I've already said you need Foden, you need one of Rashford or Fernandes. You need a double Arsenal midfield. We're already at 4.
Yeah, that's it. That's the thing. And I'm also on a Chelsea forward too. So it might be, all very likely, is the same one.
Yes.
Tune in next week to find out who that might be. I do agree though, like there isn't enough midfielder slots because you've just said how many people are essential, and that there isn't enough space. Now we kind of come on to the 6.56 million and below. This is more, I'd say you're probably going to want at least probably 6.5 million or below midfielder, just in terms of the structure.
I have 2.
Oh my God. Who are they?
Well, I haven't decided one of them. It's either in Cisco or Matoma.
Okay.
And the other one's in Mbumo.
See, I don't get Mbumo. I don't get the hype. He seems to be really like favored by all the algorithms and data freaks, and I understand that he's going to want to be like he's going to be playing far more advanced, but I believe isn't Wissa playing.
It's not that. It's at the end of the season. He was the one getting all the points. He was scoring all the goals from the right wing.
Right. I just don't get it. It doesn't excite me. I know his value and things like that. It just doesn't make me excited inside and downstairs either.
They've got, bear in mind, Brentford are a really good home team, not the best away team, but they've got Spurs at home, Spurs without any fullbacks, Fulham away, Crystal Palace at home, Bournemouth at home, Newcastle away, dreadful fixture for them, Everton at home, Forest away, first 7, Everton at home in the first 7 screams to me alone. So Brentford, a good home team, or another team, 3 home games in the first 4, 4 in the first 6. So I just feel like I need Brentford players for the first. I'm going to wildcard. I think looking at all the data and all this sort of stuff, I'm going to wildcard an 8. That looks like the best time to wildcard. It's 6.5. I can bench him against Newcastle. That's not an issue. But he was the one that was getting points over Tony last year. If you want to go Wissa, obviously someone can go Wissa. That's fine. I mean, that might even be a thing. I don't know. Is Wissa a forward on the game?
He's a forward, 6 million forward, I think.
So you could go Wissa up front and then change Mbumo to someone else in midfield. I don't think that's a terrible idea. I think actually that might be something that I might do. But I want one of the two with them fixtures. Absolutely want one of those two players.
Yeah, and I think it's all down to your kind of your team structure, because if you're a five-man midfield, the likelihood is if you've not got Salah, it's like 2 9 millions, 1 8.5, maybe one 7.5, and then a 6.5 is like the template he sort of, and then that one 6.5 is either going to be Matoma, who only got one attack and return in his final 10 games.
Well, you see, that's why I've got an
which was an assist. Exactly, but he might not even start. But I mean, if it was up to me, I would probably get in Cisco and save the 1 million on Matoma. And Matoma doesn't excite me either. This is why I've got the 4-man midfield, because I feel like, because I feel like anyone below 6 million, I'm not considering, because I just don't see, because the pricing's so good, anyone who's worth something is priced higher than that. There's a lot of options.
Brighton's fixtures, Matt. Look at Brighton's fixtures.
The only Brighton player that I think I've got is Estupinan at the moment. I was tempted with my third striker slot to go with Evan Ferguson.
Nah.
But I've got or João Pedro, but
Welbeck looks like he might be the one to start.
Ultimately, mate, I think because of the midfielders and the structure of my team, I've kind of went for 4 very good quality midfielders, and then 1 premium striker and 2 mid-price strikers, as opposed to, because it gives me a little bit more.
How much is mid-priced?
So I've got 8 million and 7.5 million.
Jesus and Nkunku.
Essentially, yeah. But then, so because what that means is I can, because Nkunku's fixtures long term are quite good, it means that if another 7.5 emerges, I've got that maneuverability. Whereas in midfield, I've got four decent money invested in my 4 midfielders, so I've got maneuverability in that sense. I don't need that extra 5 million. And obviously, if it turns out that I've made a terrible mistake, then I can always downgrade one of those 3 strikers with a mini wild card in game week 3 and bring in that 5th midfielder. But at the moment, I feel like, I don't know, I just think it's going to be, I can count on a striker to get more points with goals at the early stage of the season than what I can with a mid-priced midfielder getting goals and assists at the start of the season, is my logic. I feel safer going with an Nkunku with decent fixtures than a Matoma or a Mbumo playing out wide, is my theory anyway. So yeah, honourable mention to Eze as well. Is quite popular at 12% owned. I just don't I think he's a bit of a non-starter because of the other opportunities elsewhere. Is there any other players that you think are worth mentioning, Dan, before we wrap things up?
I like Eze as a pick again. I think he's having an absolute stormer in pre-season. I'm just having a quick look at his fixtures. Evens on home and away. Palace.
I did have him at the back end of last season. He was really good, in fairness.
Because I just think if you've got, the thing is, if you've got the 6.5 midfielders, you become really flexible with what formation you can play to maximize every week's fixtures for 8 weeks. There's never a game week where you've got like, oh, I'm struggling here. One of my players has got a good team. Like if you had Eze, you start him against Sheffield United, you can bench him against Arsenal, you can bench him against Brentford, play him against Wolves, bench him against Villa, play him against, like you just bench him. He's for his price. I'm personally probably not going to go there. But that's obviously what you can do with your Brighton lad. It's what you can do with Mbumo. Anyone in that price range, if you've got 2 of them, you don't need to play them, which is what I quite like, because I've got 4 defenders that I quite like. I've got 3 forwards that I quite like. So I can mess around. I can target fixtures at the minute, anyway. So I do get what you're saying. It's from a structural point of view. I think because I'm wildcarding in game week 8 anyway, I think I don't really need too much structure. I think if it was a long-term play, then I think you're 100% right. Like, you can't have two players at that price point because getting up to another one is a nightmare. I actually have in my current draft 2.5 million in the bank.
Wow. Okay. I think I've got
So
0.5, but 2.5 million's a stretch, mind.
yeah, well, it is a stretch, and that's why I actually think moving in Cisco and Mbumo up, because I don't have that second Arsenal midfielder in which I need. So I actually think by moving maybe Mbumo to Wissa and then having Martinelli in there and removing my Brighton striker,
Right.
could help in just having double Brighton, maybe.
Well, we can talk about strikers next week and how that might
can.
affect your team. Because we can wrap this up nicely, mate. So that was our preview of midfielders. There are plenty of other midfielders to choose from below 6 million. Obviously, we've got Tonali in particular, and Ciso, who we've kind of spoken about briefly. But other than that, it's not really that's quite slim pickings.
There is one more. Andres Pereira.
Yeah, who was decent last year. He
Really
was
good
starting
last
off at
year.
4.5.
Depends when Mitro's on, and Mitro looks like he's off. Also, on Fulham trying to sign someone. I can't remember who it is, but they're actually trying to sign a really good striker. Just can't remember who it is.
I don't know whether it's really good, but they've signed Raul Jimenez.
Oh, yeah, that was it.
Yeah,
I think Raul Jimenez is a good player for Fulham because he's the same kind of profile as Mitrovic, isn't he? They're going to just whip balls in, he's going to head them in.
Potentially. I don't think he's been the same player for a few years, but he's definitely one
because of his head injury, yeah.
Yeah, to consider if their fixtures get decent. But anyway, we're wrapping this one up.
Sorry.
No. So, thank you very much for watching. If you did get this far, thank you very, very much. Please give it a like, subscribe to the channel because it's not just FPL content. There's a whole host of amazing Newcastle United content for you to watch, obviously at your leisure. We'll be back next week to have a chat about forwards in the game, and which ones we are going to be choosing. And then the week after that, it'll be our last podcast before the FPL season starts, or the Premier League starts, where we'll be revealing our FPL drafts for the final time before it all kicks off. Thanks for watching. Like, obviously in the comments, pop down who you think's going to be in your midfield. We've had a few comments recently on all of our videos, which we've enjoyed kind of responding to. But yeah, keep them coming because we do enjoy reading them. So thanks very much for watching, and see you all next time.
Bye, bro.